One of the other teams, Dalton, that is a favorite to come out of the ACC is that team right there over there. The Clemson Tigers going up against the Georgia Bulldogs. Number 1 Georgia against number 14 Clemson. Not a home game for Georgia, but it is in Atlanta, so it's kind of a home game for the Bulldogs. That is at noon Eastern time on ABC. And Dalton, really interesting storyline in this one is that we have a matchup of the only coaches in the country with multiple national championships. The guys right behind us right here, Kirby Smart and Dabo Swinney, they're the only coaches that currently have multiple national titles. Kirby Smart obviously won 2 with Georgia recently, 2 in the last, 3 years. Dabo Swinney won 2, a few years ago. And the only other coach in the country who has at least 1 national title to his name is the guy that we interviewed, Mack Brown, the current North Carolina head coach, who of course won his with Texas. But yeah, with Nick Saban retired, man, now these two stand alone as the only coaches in the nation with multiple national titles.
Absolutely, but they have very different states of their programs right now too. When you talk about, Georgia's won 2 of the last 3, right? And Dabo hasn't won one since, it's 2018 or 2020?
The Lawrence freshman year.
Yeah.
So, 2018.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're talking about a little bit different state. You still feel like Georgia's squarely in the national title picture, whereas Clemson has kind of fallen off a little bit, right, especially offensively since Trevor Lawrence left. So, you're really getting into a territory here where it's like Clemson is kind of verging on that line. Like ACC contention is great and playoff contention is great, but they expect to win national titles.
Absolutely. Yeah, Clemson, you mentioned it. Georgia's number 1 in the country. Clemson right now, number 14. This is their lowest preseason ranking in a decade, man. So it has been a long time since Clemson started the year this low in a preseason ranking after losing 4 games last year. So let's get into the matchups to watch, Dawn. And you had the Clemson offense against the Georgia defense in this game. What are you looking forward to on that side of the ball?
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting when you go back and look, Clemson started 4-4 last year, and they had a lot of offensive struggles. But when you really watch them, a lot of times I find like, here's one schematic thing they need to do better. Here's one, here's a couple of guys that need to play better, or a unit or something. They just need to just play better across the board. I know it sounds simple, but their offense ranked outside of the top 60 in every metric of grading that we had last season. Every single one. Passing, offensive line, rushing, receiving, everything. Just as a unit, they just couldn't consistently put it together, right? And I know they finished 9-4, but really good defense, really good turnover differential, didn't play a ton of elite offenses in the ACC. They just have to be better, right? And obviously it starts with the quarterback. It starts with Cade Klubnik. So you're talking about a guy with a 63.9 passing grade last year, former 5-star prospect. I know those are your favorite. 6.1 yards per attempt, near the bottom of the country, only a 2.3% big-time throw rate. And honestly, a lot of I think it was 19 turnover-worthy plays to 11 big-time throws. And you're talking about a guy, people go, well, at least he doesn't throw a lot of interceptions, but he had 8 balls that were dropped interceptions, and that was the second most in the Power 5. So you're really talking about him getting away with a lot of mistakes, but their offense didn't. When you watch Clemson, they have a lot of plays where it feels like, okay, 10 guys execute their assignment, and then 1 doesn't, and that's the one guy that the play. It could be Klubnik missing a throw. It could be a drop outside. It could be a guard blowing a blitz pickup. It could be anything. It was really You can't pinpoint one thing with this Clemson offense, right? And you can't have that lack of execution when you're playing a team as good as Georgia, a Kirby Smart defense, right? They were still the 13th highest graded defense in the country last year, even though their pass rush wasn't as great as it usually is, but it's still an elite defense with elite players, right? Malachi Starks, Mykel Williams, Jalen Walker. At all 3 levels, you're just talking about a team that you have to play perfect football against to beat them, right? You saw it with Alabama when they beat them in the SEC title game. Clemson just needs to execute better, right? Obviously, they didn't add a whole lot in the portal. They don't add anything in the portal. So talent acquisition isn't necessarily their forte when it comes to the transfer portal. Right now, they just have to come in here and play better football. I wish I could give you another big schematic thing, but they just have to take their talent and execute better.
Yeah, they absolutely do. And really, the offense is what held them back last year, right? Because the Clemson defense, and I'll get into it right now, the Clemson defense is still pretty damn good, right? And my biggest matchup I'm looking forward to, it's one that's going to decide a lot of this game, but also just one that it's like, man, I cannot wait to watch these guys go at it. The Georgia offensive line against the Clemson defensive line. In my opinion, Georgia had the number 2 offensive line in the country heading into the season, and Clemson's defensive line is number 9 in the country in my ranking as well. That whole matchup of tackles to other tackle and guards and centers, they're all great. I'm excited for that matchup, but the one I'm really excited about, man, is the guards for Georgia. Dylan Fairchild and Tate Ratledge, 2 of the best guards in America, especially pass protection-wise. going up against Peter Woods, who was absolutely stellar as a true freshman last year. He had an 87.6 PFF grade in 2023. That was the third best we've ever seen by a true freshman defensive tackle. And Dalton, the only two that were above him were Dexter Lawrence and Ed Oliver, who, according to our rankings, are two of the top 25 defensive tackles in the NFL right now. Both of them make upwards of $15 million a year as well. So I can't wait, man, to watch Ratledge and Fairchild try to handle this star sophomore for Clemson right now, man. So I'm really excited for this matchup, and I think that right now Clemson is going to be in a really interesting spot, man, with Peter Woods as the superstar sophomore. I think our sixth best defensive tackle in college football entering the year. And, man, he has all the makings of the next star D tackle in college football and the next star D tackle maybe in the NFL draft. I know you put out an article recently, Don, on the 2026 NFL draft, the guys to know in that class, and Peter Woods is certainly one of them.
Yeah, absolutely. We had some spectacular true freshmen, especially on defense last year, and he was one of the best ones. You talk about especially the way he plays the run. Some people will go, well, why do you take a guy who I believe he didn't have a sack last year, 20-something pressures? Well, he's as good a run defender as any player in the country. Honestly, he was their best last year. On the run defense alone, he was in the top 10 in overall grading last season. So you talk about a guy who's an impact piece and really sets the whole tone for their front seven, right? Clemson, they're going to win games on defense. That's how it works. But it always starts up front, and Peter Woods is a foundation piece for that.
He absolutely is, man. And pass rush win rate for him was very high as well. And going against Tate Ratledge and Dylan Fairchild last year, they were two of the top 4 guards in the Power 5 in pass blocking grade. So I'm excited for that, man. And people probably know Tate Ratledge already from the college football video game. Ratledge is one of the 10 highest rated players in the college football video game, right? So I'm excited for that matchup between Ratledge, Fairchild against Peter Woods. That's really the big heavyweight matchup I'm looking forward to in this game. All right, Dawn. Who is winning this game? Can Clemson pull off the colossal upset in Atlanta, or will Georgia show us why they're the number 1 team in the country right now?
I think Georgia is going to show us why they're the best team in the country, or at least the number 1 ranked team in the country, right? And Clemson, to me, look, you have to execute almost perfectly offensively to beat a Kirby Smart defense, to beat this Georgia defense. And Clemson just doesn't always do that. On top of the fact that against the Blitz last year, Max, they were 95th in the country in offensive grade as a team. And Georgia throws, especially in obvious passing situations, they throw a ton of different looks at you, a ton of different blitzes, stunts, simulated pressures, every type of coverage you can think of. On top of all the talent they have, they can just beat you one-on-one. So I don't expect it to be like a couple of years ago when these two played and it was 10-3.
Yeah.
Because I do think at least Georgia's offense is better than it was then. I believe it's a really good argument that Carson Beck is the best quarterback in the country. Mm-hmm. And I just think his ability to play it safe with the football, make the right decisions, and get rid of it quickly through what is a really good Clemson defense still. Clemson's defense can keep them in this game, but I just question their ability to score enough points. I think eventually it gets away from them. I'm going to take Georgia 27-10.
I'm going to be a little bit closer. I have Georgia winning this game 31-20. I mentioned before, Carson Beck is the best quarterback in America. I think he'll ultimately lead the Bulldogs to a victory in this game, but I do think, like you mentioned, that Clemson defense will put up enough of a fight in the first half especially, I think, for this to be an interesting one. For us to go into halftime and be like, oh, wait a minute, can Clemson pull this off? And then I think Georgia will pull away in the second half with Carson Beck making enough throws at the end to ultimately win this game. But I do think 31-20 is my final score. I do think Clemson will keep it relatively close in this game.